I retired at 41. Not the kind of retirement where you sell a business for 8 figures and move to a villa in Tuscany, the quiet kind, where you've spent 17 years making disciplined decisions, investing every extra dollar, keeping your fixed costs low, and one morning you look at your spreadsheet and realize you actually did it. The number is real. The freedom is real. So I bought a beach house on the Carolina coast for $280,000 cash, a place with a wraparound porch and 3 bedrooms, and a master bath with a clawfoot tub I had specifically picked out from a salvage catalog. It was mine, every square foot of it. My daughter Celeste is 20 years old and a junior at the University of South Carolina. She is bright, funny, and at this particular moment in her life, she has not yet fully grasped the concept that things belong to people. That the beach house was not a resort. That 47 sorority sisters are not a guest list, they are a liability. That inviting them without asking was not a favor to me, it was a decision she made on my behalf, with my property, without my knowledge. I drove down on a Friday afternoon expecting to spend the weekend alone. What I found was a full party already 2 hours in. Broken windows in the back bedroom, furniture stained with what I can only describe as the combined output of 47 young women who had been celebrating since noon, the master bathroom flooded because someone had apparently decided the bathtub drain was optional, and my favorite throw blanket, the white cashmere one, in a condition I will not describe. I stood at the door of my own house, suitcase still in my hand, and I did not scream. I have been saving things up for a long time. I know how to wait. I smiled. I looked at the 47 faces turning toward me with that particular expression of young people who have just been caught, and I said, very quietly, "Before anyone leaves, you should know that I have already called the police." The room went through 3 different kinds of silence in about 4 seconds. Let me tell you how we got here. I have been underestimated my entire adult life, and I have made a private peace with that fact because the underestimating has almost always worked in my favor. When people assume you are less capable than you are, they stop watching. When they stop watching, you can build things in peace. My name is Nora Scott. I grew up in a mid-sized town in central Virginia where my parents ran a hardware store, where money was present but never comfortable, and where the assumption in our family was that you worked hard enough to be stable, and that stability was the ceiling. My mother is Linda Scott, a woman I love and who drove me absolutely crazy for most of my 20s with her habit of measuring ambition against risk and always finding ambition wanting. My father, Roland Scott, died when I was 27, quietly, from a heart condition he had been managing badly for a decade. And after his death, my mother tightened even further, as if the lesson of his life was that you should never reach too far. Celeste is my biological daughter from my first marriage to a man named Derek Huang, which ended when she was 3 years old and he took a job in Singapore, and through some alchemy I still do not entirely understand, simply stopped coming back. He is not a villain. He is just the kind of person who lets the distance between himself and his obligations grow until the distance becomes the relationship. He remarried. He sends birthday cards on time. He pays his portion of Celeste's college expenses reliably. We are civil in the way that divorced parents who have genuinely moved on are civil, without warmth, but without venom either. I raised Celeste mostly alone. For the first 12 years of her life, I worked in commercial real estate, not selling houses to families, but brokering commercial leases and eventually acquisitions for mid-sized retail chains looking to expand. It is a business that rewards patience, precision, and the ability to hold your face still when someone across the table is trying to read your position. Those were skills I had in abundance, and they served me. The underestimating started early and stayed consistent. When I was 31, my mother told me at Thanksgiving, in front of my aunt and my cousin's husband, that she thought I should consider something more stable. "Real estate is a gamble," she said, setting down her fork with that slow, deliberate energy she uses when she believes she is delivering wisdom. "What happens when the market turns?" I had closed a $150,000 commission that week, my best quarter to date. I nodded and asked her to pass the cranberry sauce. When I was 34, a former colleague named Ben Ockaffer, who had been in the same office as me for 6 years, who had watched me close deals he could not have structured, was promoted over me because, and I was told this indirectly through our mutual supervisor in the mildest possible language, he projected leadership more naturally. I knew what that meant. I did not argue. Instead, I spent the next 4 months building a client relationship with a regional grocery chain that ended up being the largest single deal our firm had brokered in 11 years. Ben sent me a congratulatory email. I kept it, because I keep things. The incident that sealed the pattern was the year I turned 37. My mother had begun dating a man named Howard Bellamy. Retired, comfortable, the kind of man who had opinions about wine without being interesting about them. And Howard had a daughter from his first marriage named Denise Bellamy, who was approximately my age and who worked in hospital administration, and who decided, within 2 meetings, that she understood my life better than I did. At a dinner at my mother's house, Denise told me she thought I should look into whether my freelance work qualified for any small business grants, and said it with such genuine helpfulness that I had to physically keep my hands flat on the table to prevent myself from reacting. At that point, I had a net worth I will not specify here, but I will say that it was not the net worth of someone who needs small business grants. I thanked her for the suggestion. 3 days later, I called my financial advisor, a woman named Suyeon Park at a wealth management firm in Charlotte, and we moved forward on the beach house acquisition I had been planning for 2 years. That is the thing about being underestimated. It creates fuel. Not bitterness, I want to be clear about the distinction, but a specific, clean, productive kind of energy that comes from knowing something the other person does not know. I was not angry at my mother. I was not angry at Howard's daughter. I was grateful, in a strange way, for the ongoing evidence that I was still invisible to the people who should have been paying attention. Invisible people can build things. If you have ever been counted out by someone who should have known better, you know exactly what that quiet feels like. The beach house was the culmination of 17 years of that fuel. I had been watching the Carolina coast market for 4 years, waiting for the right property at the right price. When the listing came up, 3 bedrooms, wraparound porch, direct beach access, priced under $300,000 because the previous owner had died and the estate was motivated to close quickly, I moved in 11 days. No mortgage, no committee to consult, no one to tell. I made the offer was accepted, and on a Thursday afternoon in late September, I sat on my new porch with a cup of coffee and watched the Atlantic move and felt something I had not felt in a very long time, which was the specific satisfaction of a plan fully executed. I told my mother about it 2 weeks later, on a Sunday call. There was a pause on the phone that I recognized, not pride, not quite surprise, but the recalibration that happens when someone's model of you turns out to be wrong and they are not entirely sure how to update it. "Nora," she said, "that is a lot of money to spend on a vacation property." "It is," I said. "It's also mine." Another pause, then, "Well, I hope Celeste will get to enjoy it." That was 3 years ago. Celeste had been to the beach house 4 times since then, and each time she had been respectful and enthusiastic and had commented on what good taste I had. She loved the clawfoot tub. She loved the porch. She had, on her 3rd visit, brought a friend named Kayla who was lovely and ate all my granola, and I genuinely did not mind. What she had not done, in 3 years, was ask whether she could bring 47 people. That omission would turn out to be expensive. I need to back up slightly and explain 2 things, because they are relevant to what happened next, and I want you to understand them before we get to the confrontation. The first thing is that approximately 18 months before the sorority incident, I had a conversation with an attorney named Gideon Falk, a property and estate lawyer based out of Raleigh who had been recommended to me by Suyeon, my financial advisor. After I mentioned that I wanted to make sure the beach house was properly structured in terms of long-term ownership. Gideon is the kind of lawyer who asks 20 questions before answering one, and who has the particular gift of making you feel that every contingency you failed to consider was not negligence, but simply a gap that he is now here to close. We met on a Wednesday in February, 2 years and 3 months before the sorority invasion, in his office on Glenwood Avenue, and we talked for an hour and 40 minutes. What we discussed in that meeting I will come to later. What matters now is that after that meeting, certain documents existed that did not exist before, and those documents were sitting in a fireproof safe in my house in Charlotte, not the beach house, my primary residence, and also on file with Gideon's office. And also, because Suyeon had advised me to create a 3rd copy, in a secure digital vault that I accessed with a 12-character password I have never written down anywhere. The second thing I need to explain is the college fund. When Celeste turned 5, I opened a 529 account in her name and began contributing to it every month without exception. Not dramatically, I started at $300 a month and increased it as my income grew. By the time she enrolled at the University of South Carolina, the account held just over $94,000, which covered her first 2 years entirely. I am currently funding her third year through a combination of that account and what remains from Derek's agreed contribution. The account exists. It has always existed. Celeste has always known it existed, in the abstract way that children know things are being handled without understanding how. What Celeste did not know, what no one in my family knew, because I had not chosen to share it, was that in my meeting with Gideon Falk, we had formalized certain conditions around her inheritance of the beach house. Not punitive conditions, reasonable ones. The kind a sensible person puts in place when they own a significant asset and want to make sure that asset is treated with respect. The conditions were not triggered by small things. 47 sorority girls and $180,000 in damage is not a small thing. I want to be clear about that number, $180,000. I know how it sounds. When I tell people, they often look at me with an expression that says they think I am exaggerating, and then I walk them through it, and they stop looking at me that way. The broken windows in the back bedroom were 3 large panes of custom low-E glass that the previous owners had installed, replacement cost with installation, $6,400. The furniture damage was extensive. A sectional sofa I had purchased 2 years ago, stained beyond recovery. A dining set with a surface so destroyed that the restoration company I called gave me a quote, and then, after pausing, told me honestly that replacement was the more economical option. The master bathroom flooding had caused water damage to the ceiling of the room below it, which required structural remediation. I had the whole property assessed by a licensed contractor within 48 hours of the incident, because I am a person who knows that documentation is the difference between justice and a family argument. The contractor's name was Milo Torres. He walked through the house with a clipboard for 2.5 hours and then sat down with me at the kitchen table, the kitchen having survived relatively intact because the alcohol had apparently been stationed elsewhere, and gave me a figure. $179,400. He rounded up in his report. I had taken photographs before Milo arrived. I had taken a video walkthrough on my phone, time-stamped, beginning at the moment I pulled into the driveway and ending 40 minutes later after I had documented every room. I had, before any cleaning or arrangement was disturbed, called the non-emergency police line for the county and filed an incident report. The responding officer, a young woman named Deputy Carla Whitmore, and yes, I am aware that is almost a cliché of a law enforcement name, but that is actually what her badge said, had walked the property with me and noted the damage in her official report. I was not reacting. I was building. Let me tell you about the close calls, because there were 2 of them, and they matter for what happened later. The first close call happened 6 weeks after the incident, at a family dinner at my mother's house. My mother and Howard host a monthly Sunday dinner that has become a fixed feature of our family calendar since they got married 3 years ago, and I attend because Celeste attends, and because I am a person who believes in maintaining the surface of things while working quietly underneath. My mother makes a pot roast that is genuinely excellent. Howard talks about golf. Denise, who now attends these dinners regularly with her husband Felix Chen, holds court about the hospital administration world with the energy of someone who believes everyone else is waiting for the update. I had not yet told anyone in the family about the full extent of the damage, or about the contractor's report, or about the police report, or about the letter I had sent to the university's Dean of Students' office documenting the incident and formally notifying them that 47 enrolled students had been present at a property destruction event. I had told my mother that Celeste had had some friends at the beach house without asking, and that there had been some damage. My mother's response was to suggest that I try to have a calm conversation with Celeste about boundaries. I had nodded. At this particular Sunday dinner, 6 weeks out, Celeste was present and had been quiet all evening in the particular way of someone who knows a larger conversation is coming and is trying to delay it by being very well behaved at dinner. She passed the bread. She complimented Howard on the wine. She asked my mother about the garden. Midway through the meal, Howard, who had been unusually quiet himself, cleared his throat and looked at me across the table. "Nora," he said, "Linda mentioned there was an incident at your beach place. How bad was it, really?" I set my fork down. Picked up my water glass, took a small sip. "It was significant." Denise tilted her head. "How significant? Like a few $1,000s? More than that." Felix looked up from his plate. He is a quiet man and accountant who I have come to respect because he is one of the only people at that table who thinks before speaking. He looked at his wife first. "Maybe that's between Nora and Celeste." "Of course," Denise said smoothly, but her eyes were still on me. "I just think sometimes these things get blown out of proportion. College kids are careless." "It doesn't mean $179,000, I said. The table produced a particular quality of silence that I have only experienced a few times in my life. Denise set her wine glass down with a small, precise click. Howard's hand went to his collar. My mother looked at me with an expression I recognized, not disbelief, but the particular recalibration she does when her model of a situation turns out to have been significantly wrong. Celeste did not look up from her plate for a long time. When she did, her eyes were red at the edges. "Celeste," I said, "I am not doing this here. We will talk privately, but I wanted everyone to have the accurate number since there seems to be some curiosity." Denise opened her mouth. Felix touched her arm. She closed it. I picked my fork back up and finished my pot roast. What no one at that table knew, what I had not yet chosen to share, was that 3 days before this dinner, I had called Gideon Falk and asked him to pull the beach house documents out of his files. We had a 40-minute conversation about options, about timing, about what I wanted the outcome to look like. Gideon had that quality the best lawyers have of not telling you what to do, but of laying the landscape out so clearly that the right path becomes obvious on its own. "The conditions we documented," he had said, "are clear. The question is how you want to activate them and when." "Not yet," I had told him. "I want the full picture first." "Understood," Gideon said. He always understood. The second close call came 4 weeks after the dinner. I had been in contact with the university's student affairs office, and I had also, through a process I will not detail completely here, obtained a copy of the sorority's formal event registration records, a public document, as it turned out, because the sorority had filed a social event request with the university for that weekend, identifying the location as an off-campus private residence. The form had Celeste's name on it as the authorizing host. The form listed the number of anticipated attendees as 52. When I saw that number, 52, I felt something I can only describe as a very cold, very focused clarity. Because it told me that Celeste had not only invited the girls without asking me. She had planned it, registered it, anticipated it, and then lowballed the headcount on the official form. I printed the document and put it in the fireproof safe with Gideon's papers. The close call itself happened at a coffee shop near the university. Celeste and I had been meeting monthly since the incident, carefully, on neutral ground, having the preliminary conversations that I think we both knew were leading somewhere neither of us had named yet. On this particular morning, Celeste arrived 12 minutes late, sat down across from me, wrapped both hands around her coffee cup, and said, "Mom, I need to tell you something." My hand stayed completely still on the table. "Go ahead." She looked at me for a long moment with an expression I knew from her childhood, the combination of guilt and rehearsed speech that meant she had been thinking about this conversation for several days. "I want to take responsibility. I know what I did was wrong. I know the damage was bad. I know you're upset." She paused, "But I also talked to Dad." "What did you and your father discuss?" "He thinks." She stopped, started again. "He thinks that maybe the property assessment was high, that maybe you could get it repaired for less. He knows someone who does contracting and he said, 'Celeste.'" My voice was even. "The assessment was done by a licensed contractor with 17 years of experience, whose report is on file with my insurance company, and whose findings were consistent with an independent estimate I obtained from a second firm." She blinked 3 times fast. She has done this since she was small, before she cries. "I'm just saying what Dad said. I understand what your father said." I picked up my coffee. "Is there anything else you wanted to tell me?" There was a long pause. She looked down at her cup. He also said that the beach house is going to be mine someday, and that maybe you shouldn't let one mistake. I set my coffee down with a sound that was not loud but had a particular quality of finality that stopped her mid-sentence. Celeste, I said, I want you to hear me very carefully right now because I am going to say this once and I am not going to repeat it. The beach house is mine. It belongs to me today. What happens with it in the future is a decision I will make on my own timeline, based on criteria that are already documented, and what your father thinks about it is not relevant to any of those decisions. She looked at me. The redness was back at the edges of her eyes. Did you handle the damage report form? I continued. The one the sorority filed with the university? Something flickered across her face. Quick and controlled, but there. The one listing you as the authorizing host, I said. The one with 52 anticipated attendees. Her hand went to her coffee cup, and she turned it in a small circle once, twice. A tell I had learned over the years, the physical equivalent of her mind moving fast. I have that document, I told her. I have the contractor's report, the insurance assessment, the police incident report filed by Deputy Carla Whitmore on the afternoon of the incident, and the university's formal acknowledgement of my notification letter. I have everything, Celeste. I have been building this file for 10 weeks. I leaned forward slightly. So when you tell me your father thinks the assessment was high, I want you to understand that this conversation is not actually about the assessment. She put her cup down. What is it about? I picked up my bag from the chair beside me, took out an envelope, and slid it across the table. That is a formal letter of notice. You should give it to your sorority president. Gideon Falk's information is in the header. His office will be contacting the chapter's national organization within the next 10 days regarding their liability. Celeste did not open the envelope. She looked at it the way you look at something you were not expecting and are not sure you want to accept. Mom, she said quietly, are you serious right now? I was serious when I bought the house, I said. I have been serious every day since. This is just the part where it becomes visible. I left a $20 bill on the table for the coffees and walked out into a morning that was bright and cold and felt, despite everything, like the beginning of something I had been preparing for longer than I realized. And that was before the police arrived at my beach house on the afternoon of the following Friday with a very specific set of questions, and I discovered that the damage was not the only thing Celeste had neglected to mention. The Friday that changed everything began with a phone call I did not expect. It was 10 days after my coffee shop conversation with Celeste, 10 days after I had slid that envelope across the table and watched her look at it like it might bite her. And I was sitting at my kitchen table in Charlotte, going through the most recent correspondence from Gideon's office, when my phone lit up with a number I did not recognize. A South Carolina area code. I answered it on the second ring. The voice on the other end belonged to a detective named Armand Cho, and he was calling from the county sheriff's department that covered the coastal district where my beach house sat. Ms. Scott, he said, I want to follow up on the incident report filed approximately 10 weeks ago by Deputy Whitmore. We've developed some additional information we'd like to discuss with you in person. Would you be available to come to the property this Friday? I kept my voice level. What kind of additional information? A brief pause. We'd prefer to discuss it with you on site. It relates to the property damage, but also to some items we've identified as potentially missing from the residence. The word missing landed in my chest like something dropping from a height. What items? I asked. Ms. Scott, I'd really prefer to go through this in person. There are some details we need to verify with you directly before we can characterize the situation accurately. I told him I would be there Friday at 2 in the afternoon. I hung up and sat very still for approximately 90 seconds. Then I called Gideon. He answered on the third ring. I told him what Detective Cho had said. There was a silence on his end that I had learned to interpret as him thinking very fast and very carefully. Go, he said. I'll have my paralegal reach out to the sheriff's department before you arrive to make sure you have appropriate representation present if needed. Don't go in without knowing what they have first. Call me from the parking lot before you walk in. I drove down Thursday evening and stayed the night in a hotel 2 miles from the beach house. I had not stayed at the beach house since the initial documentation visit. I was not ready to sleep in a space that still, even after a cleaning crew's first pass, felt violated. I sat in the hotel room that night and made a list of everything I knew was in the beach house that had any significant value, working from memory and from the photographs on my phone. Jewelry, I had never kept jewelry at the beach house. Electronics, One television in the living room, one in the master bedroom, a laptop stand but no laptop because I always brought my computer with me. Artwork. 2 pieces, both original, both purchased from a gallery in Charleston 3 years ago. One was a coastal landscape by an artist named Dolores Vance, whose work I had followed for several years. The other was a smaller abstract piece I had bought on impulse. I looked at my photographs from the initial walkthrough. I scrolled through them slowly, room by room, frame by frame. Both paintings were in the photographs from the day of the incident, still on the walls, undisturbed. I went back to the photographs from my second visit, 3 weeks later, taken to document the progress of the cleaning and the beginning of the damage assessment. I scrolled to the living room wall. The Dolores Vance painting was gone. I stared at my phone for a long moment. Then I went back and checked the master bedroom photographs. The abstract was also gone. I had not noticed. I want to be honest about that. I had been so focused on the structural damage, on the furniture and the windows and the flooded bathroom, that I had not cataloged the artwork separately. It had been in my peripheral vision in the initial photos, and I had not registered its absence in the second set because I had not been looking for it. I called Gideon at 7:45 in the morning. "The Dolores Vance piece," I told him. "I paid $22,000 for it 2 years ago. There's a certificate of authenticity in the safe at my Charlotte house. The other one I paid $6,000 for. Both are gone from the property as of my second visit, which was 3 weeks after the incident." Gideon was quiet for a moment. "That's theft, Nora. That's not property damage. That's a separate criminal charge." "I know. Do you have any idea who took them?" "I have 47 candidates," I said. "One of them is my daughter." There was the sound of Gideon moving papers. "Call me from the parking lot." I arrived at the beach house at 1:50 in the afternoon. Detective Cho was already there, a compact man in his 40s with a direct, unhurried manner and the particular professional calm of someone who delivers bad news regularly enough to have developed a system for it. He had a colleague with him, a younger officer whose name I recorded in my phone. Gideon's paralegal, a woman named Renata Ojda, who worked out of the Raleigh office and drove down that morning, stood beside me with a legal pad. Detective Cho walked me through what they had developed. In the weeks following the initial incident report, the department had received a tip through the university's student conduct office. Because I had filed my notification letter there, and the office had, apparently, taken it more seriously than I expected, identifying 2 students who had been seen leaving the property on the afternoon of the incident carrying items. The tip was anonymous. The department had followed up. One of the students had, in a conversation with a campus conduct officer that was apparently less careful than it should have been, mentioned the paintings specifically. "We have a statement," Detective Cho said, "from a third party who observed one of the students posting photographs on social media of items consistent with your description of the missing artwork. The photographs were taken down within 48 hours, but they were captured by the reporting party before deletion." Renata's pen moved steadily across her legal pad. "One of the students," I said. "Can you tell me who?" Detective Cho looked at me with the measured expression of someone who is choosing his words correctly. "At this point in the investigation, we are not releasing names, but I want to ask you directly, was your daughter present at the property on the day of the incident?" I looked at him for a moment. "She was the one who organized it." He nodded. "We're aware." The silence between us had a specific texture. I felt something in my chest that was not grief exactly and not rage exactly, but some combination of the two that had been building for 10 weeks and had just in this moment found its final shape. "What are the potential charges?" Renata asked. "Depending on the value of the items," Detective Cho said, "we're looking at felony theft. The $22,000 piece puts us well above the threshold for grand larceny. We're also examining whether there's an additional charge related to the organized nature of the event." He paused. "Ms. Scott, I want to be transparent with you. This investigation is active. We have not made arrests. We are asking you to formally document the missing items, provide any receipts or certificates of authenticity, and identify any individuals you believe may have knowledge of the theft." I pulled out my phone and showed him the photographs, the ones from the initial visit showing the paintings, the ones from 3 weeks later showing the empty walls. He took the phone, examined the images, handed it back. "We'll need copies." "You'll have them today," Renata said. I called Gideon from the parking lot afterward. I sat in my car with the engine running and the ocean visible between 2 houses across the road, and I told him everything Detective Cho had said. Gideon listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "We move up the timeline. The conditions in the trust documentation are triggered by destruction of property or theft from the property. You wrote that language yourself, Nora. This qualifies 3 times over." "I know. Do you want to wait for the investigation to conclude, or do you want to move now?" The ocean was flat and gray and very still from where I was sitting. I thought about the Dollars Vance painting. I thought about the gallery in Charleston where I had bought it, the afternoon I had spent there, the particular satisfaction of owning something beautiful that you have chosen carefully and paid for honestly. "Move now," I said. "File everything. Original timeline, full scope. I'll have it drafted by Monday." I drove back to Charlotte that evening. I had exactly 1 week before the confrontation I had been building toward for months became unavoidable, because I had already accepted, 3 days earlier, an invitation to Howard and my mother's house for a family dinner on the following Saturday. Celeste would be there. My mother and Howard would be there. Denise and Felix would be there. I had planned to use that dinner as an opportunity for a private conversation with Celeste, a preliminary step before the formal process began. But the Friday call from Detective Cho had changed the geometry of everything. This was no longer a civil matter. This was no longer a conversation about responsibility and restitution. This was a felony investigation with my daughter's name adjacent to it, and I was going to that dinner on Saturday with Gideon's documents filed, with copies of the police report and the incident documentation and the theft timeline in a folder in my bag, and I was going to handle it the way I handle things. Completely. Thoroughly, without leaving anything on the table. If you are still with me, stay, because what I did at that dinner is the reason I am telling you this story. My mother's house is a 2-story colonial in a quiet part of Raleigh that she bought with my father 30 years ago and has been unwilling to reconsider ever since, despite the fact that it has 4 bedrooms and she uses 1. The dining room fits 8 people comfortably. On the Saturday I am describing, the last Saturday in January, it fit 7. My mother Linda, Howard, Denise, Felix, Celeste, and me. And Gideon via telephone on standby. I arrived at 6:15. I had chosen my clothing with the same deliberateness I bring to everything that matters. Dark trousers, a silk blouse I had bought in New York 2 years ago, earrings that were simple and expensive in the quiet way that announces itself only to people paying attention. My folder was in my bag. My phone was charged. I had eaten a small meal beforehand because I have learned that you do not want to be hungry during the most important conversation of your life. My mother met me at the door. She touched my arm. "I'm glad you came," she said, and meant it. "Of course," I said, and kissed her cheek. The table was set with her good china. Howard had opened a bottle of red wine that he was visibly proud of. Denise was in the kitchen helping with something, and Felix was standing near the fireplace with his hands in his pockets, looking at the photographs on the mantel with the focused attention of a man who wants to appear occupied. Celeste was already seated, and she looked up when I came in with an expression I can only describe as braced, like someone who has been waiting for a sound they know is coming. I sat down across from her. I set my bag on the floor beside my chair. I picked up the wine Howard poured and I did not drink it. We went through the first 40 minutes the way you go through the surface of difficult things, politely, carefully, with enough small talk to fill the space. Howard asked about the beach house repairs. I said they were in progress. Denise asked if I had gotten the insurance sorted out. I said the claim was filed. My mother passed the rolls and asked Celeste about her classes, and Celeste gave short, contained answers that told me she had been rehearsing them. Felix ate his salad and said almost nothing. He had looked at me once when I sat down with an expression that was not quite an apology, but was the closest thing to it available to a man in his position, which was, married to a woman who talks too much, present at a dinner that is going to go badly, unwilling to intervene but not entirely comfortable with that choice. I had seen that expression before. I did not hold it against him. It was Denise who could not hold it together past the main course. She set down her fork with a decisive sound. "Nora, I have to say something." She looked at me with the directness of someone who has been waiting for permission and has decided to stop waiting. "I think this situation with Celeste has gotten completely out of hand. I understand you're upset. I do. But the university is involved, and there's a police report, and I think at some point a mother has to ask herself what kind of relationship she wants with her daughter long term." The table went very quiet. I looked at Denise. "What kind of relationship do you think I want? One that survives this." Her chin lifted slightly. You can always get money back, you can't always fix what you broke. Celeste was looking at her plate. My mother was looking at me. What's been broken, I said, wasn't broken by me. Denise started to respond. Howard said quietly, Denise. She stopped, picked up her wine. But her eyes were still calculating. I could see her deciding whether this was over or just paused. It was paused. I reached down to my bag. I set the folder on the table beside my plate. I did not open it yet. Every person at the table looked at it. Celeste, I said, I want to give you the opportunity to tell everyone here what you know about the paintings. A breath, very small. She looked up from her plate for the first time since I had sat down. What do you mean? The Dollars Vance piece from the living room, the abstract from the master bedroom. $28,000 in artwork that was present in the property on the day of the incident and absent 3 weeks later. I paused. Detective Cho and I had a very thorough conversation on Friday. I thought you should know that before we go any further. The color started to drain from Celeste's face, not dramatically, slowly, like something receding. I didn't take them, she said. I didn't say you did. I kept my voice even. I said I want to know what you know. Denise cut in. Nora, if you're accusing your own daughter of theft, I'm asking my daughter a question. I did not look at Denise. I kept my eyes on Celeste. The police are not asking questions yet. They are building a file. There's a difference, and the window for that difference is not going to stay open indefinitely. Felix set down his utensils and folded his hands on the table. He did not speak, but the quality of his stillness had shifted. He was paying close attention now, and his accounting mind was clearly doing the arithmetic on what I was saying. Celeste's hands were flat on the tablecloth. I know who has them, she said. The table held that for a moment. Then you have a decision to make, I told her, and you need to make it before Monday morning when Gideon Falk files the civil action. What civil action? Denise's voice came out sharper than she intended. What is this folder? I opened it. The first document was the contractor's assessment. $179,400, itemized across 11 pages. I placed it on the table and turned it so the figures faced outward. Howard put on his glasses. He picked up the first page and went through it slowly, line by line, and the expression on his face shifted through several stages before settling somewhere between grim and resigned. My God, he said. My mother reached over and took the pages from him. She went through them more quickly than Howard, the way she has always gone through numbers. She ran the hardware store accounts for 23 years, and her financial literacy is real, whatever else I might say about her. When she finished, she set the pages down and looked at Celeste with an expression I had never quite seen on my mother's face before. Not anger, something older and heavier than anger. Celeste, my mother said, did you understand what you were doing? Celeste's voice came out very small. It was supposed to be a weekend. I didn't think. The second document, I said, is the incident report filed with the university. Celeste's name appears as the authorizing host. The event registration she filed lists 52 anticipated attendees, not 47. She planned for more and the number grew. Denise had stopped moving. Her fork was in her hand and she had forgotten it was there. The third document is the timeline of the police investigation, which is ongoing, and which has produced a witness statement and social media evidence related to the missing artwork. I looked at Celeste directly. The student who posted those photographs, their account was deleted within 48 hours, but screenshots were captured and have been provided to Detective Cho's department. Celeste's left hand came up and covered her mouth. She held it there. I want to be very clear, I said, and my voice had found a register I did not use often, not raised, but with a quality of weight behind it that I had been carrying for 10 weeks and was now setting down on the table where everyone could see it. I did not come here to ambush you. I came here because this family has a habit of making decisions about my life and my property and my daughter without consulting me, and then managing the fallout quietly, and I am done with that habit. This is not going quietly. Denise found her voice. This is your daughter. The word came out with feeling, genuine, I think, for the first time. She's 20 years old. You're going to let her get a criminal record over a painting? I am not letting her do anything. My voice did not waver. She made choices. The choices have consequences. The question is whether those consequences arrive through me, which gives her some control over the shape of them, or through Detective Cho's office, which gives her none. Howard took his glasses off and set them on the table. He rubbed his face with both hands and made a sound that was not quite a word. Felix looked at his wife with an expression she clearly did not expect, not supportive, not aligned, but level and clear. "Denise," he said carefully, "maybe listen." She turned to him. "Felix, listen," he said again, not loud, just firm. She turned back to me. Her hand went to the chain at her throat, a thin gold thing she wears every day, and she held it there. I waited. "The civil filing," I continued, "names the sorority chapter, the university chapter president, the national organization, and because her name is on the event registration as authorizing host, Celeste. Gideon Falk will file it Monday morning unless I call him and tell him otherwise. And the only thing that will prompt me to make that call is a very specific conversation about what Celeste knows, who took the artwork, and how we are going to approach this in a way that accounts for the full scope of the damage. And the beach house." Celeste's voice was barely there. "What happens to the beach house?" I had been waiting for this question. Not with cruelty, I want to be honest about that. I had been waiting for it because it was the question that opened the door to everything else I needed to say. I took a breath. "I consulted with Gideon Falk 18 months ago," I said. "We formalized certain conditions regarding the future of the beach house at that time. Those conditions are documented, witnessed, and filed. One of the conditions specifically addresses destruction or theft from the property." I paused. "The condition that was triggered by this incident stipulates that in the event of willful property damage or theft facilitated by or attributable to the named heir, the property reverts to a trust structure administered by my financial advisor, Suyeon Park, rather than passing directly to the heir." The room processed this in pieces. My mother pressed her lips together. Howard looked at the tablecloth. Celeste stared at me. "You changed the will?" "I didn't change anything. I planned carefully. There's a difference." "But you specifically," she stopped, started again. "You made it so that if something happened, you did this before the incident, 18 months before." Something shifted in her expression. The braced quality fell away, and what replaced it was rawer and more complicated, not just guilt, but the particular disorientation of realizing that someone you thought you understood had been thinking several steps ahead of you for a very long time. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because conditions that are announced in advance are not conditions," I said. "They are warnings, and I was not issuing a warning. I was protecting an asset I built with 17 years of work." Denise made a sound, half breath, half something she stopped herself from saying. Felix touched her arm. She did not pull away this time. My mother looked at me across the table with an expression I had seen only once or twice in my life, and both times it had been in the aftermath of something she had underestimated. She looked, for a moment, genuinely undone by the gap between who she thought I was and who I was actually sitting in front of her. "Nora," she said, "how long have you been planning this?" "Which part?" I asked. She held my gaze, all of it. "A long time," I said. Nobody spoke for 4 full seconds. It was Howard who broke it. He leaned forward and rested his forearms on the table and looked at Celeste with the directness of a man who, whatever else he is, has been in the world long enough to recognize when a situation has passed the point of comfortable management. "Celeste," he said, "you need to tell your mother who took those paintings." Celeste looked at Howard, then at my mother. Then at me. Her hand came down from her mouth. She squared her shoulders in a way I recognized from when she was small, the specific physical adjustment she makes when she has decided to stop being afraid of something. "It was a girl named Brittany Solis," she said. "She was at the house. She and another girl, whose name I don't know well, everyone calls her Tay, they took the paintings from the walls before everyone left. I saw them. I didn't stop them." Her voice broke slightly on the last sentence, and she let it, and then she kept going. "I knew when I came to coffee with you that you were going to find out. I was going to tell you. I kept not telling you." The silence that followed was different from the other silences at that table. It had the quality of something that had been held for a long time finally being set down. "Thank you," I said. She looked at me with the red edges back in her eyes. "Are you still going to file the civil suit?" "That depends," I said, "on the next 48 hours. I took out my phone and sent Gideon a text. "Hold on filing. We'll call Sunday morning with update." Then I looked at my daughter across the table. "You will contact Detective Cho on Monday morning and give him the names. You will go with Renata Ojda, Gideon's paralegal, who will be present to make sure you are represented. You will tell the truth completely and without omission, and then we will see what the process looks like from there." Celeste nodded, very slowly. "Okay, the restitution," I said, "all of it, the full $179,400 plus the $28,000 for the artwork. The sorority's national organization will cover a portion through their liability structure. Gideon has already begun that process. Whatever remains after their contribution is your responsibility and your father's, and I will work out the arrangement with Derek directly. I paused. This is not negotiable. Denise, quietly, that's a significant amount for a 20-year-old. It is. I did not look away from Celeste. It is also significantly less than the amount a criminal proceeding would cost her. I am offering her the cheaper option. Felix picked up his wine glass, set it down without drinking, looked at the table. I got the sense that he was doing the kind of internal accounting that accountants do when they encounter numbers that have been arranged into an argument, checking the logic, finding it sound, understanding why the conclusion was unavoidable. Howard put his glasses back on. He picked up the contractor's report and went through a second page. He put it back down. "Linda," he said to my mother, not to anyone else, "I think we should offer to help." My mother looked at him, then at me. Something moved through her expression that I did not expect and had not prepared for, not pride, not exactly, but something in that territory. The recognition of a version of me she had not seen coming. "What do you need?" she asked. It was the first time in 41 years that my mother had asked me that question and meant it as an offer rather than a prelude to advice. "Nothing," I said. "I have what I need. I've had it for a while." She nodded, slowly, her hands folded on the table in front of her. "I can see that." Denise looked between us, at my mother, then at me, and something on her face arranged itself into a kind of acceptance. Not warm, not apologetic, but the particular expression of someone who has finally measured the distance between what they assumed and what was true and found it too large to argue with. She picked up her fork. She did not speak again for the rest of the dinner. The full weight of what had happened, not just that evening but across all the weeks before it, settled onto me during the drive home. I had both hands on the wheel, and the highway was nearly empty, and I remember noticing, somewhere around mile 40, that my shoulders had dropped. That I had been carrying them up near my ears for approximately 10 weeks and had not fully registered it until they came down. I had not wanted this outcome. I want to be clear about that for anyone who is listening and imagining me as someone who had been waiting to deploy these documents with satisfaction. I had built the documentation because I am a person who prepares, not because I wanted to use it against my own daughter. The Dollars Vance painting was a beautiful piece of work and I wanted it on my wall. I wanted the clawfoot tub to work. I wanted the beach house to be the thing I had imagined when I bought it, a place of earned quiet, mine completely. That was still possible. It was damaged, not destroyed. The distinction mattered. Gideon called Sunday morning as planned. We talked for 35 minutes. I gave him the name Brittany Solis, which he passed to Renata, who passed it to Detective Cho's office before the end of the day. By Tuesday afternoon, Brittany Solis and the girl known as Tay, whose full name was Tatum Reeves, had been identified, contacted, and were in the process of being formally charged with grand larceny. The paintings, it turned out, had not left the state. Brittany Solis had them stored at her parents' home in Colombia under the apparent theory that no one would look there, which was not a sophisticated theory. The Dollars Vance piece was recovered intact. The abstract had a small scratch on the lower corner that the gallery told me could be repaired. Both paintings are back on my walls. The sorority's national organization, faced with Gideon's civil documentation and the formal police investigation, settled within 6 weeks. Their liability coverage contributed $84,000 toward the total damage and theft figure. Derek Huang, when I called him in Singapore and explained the situation with the specificity it deserved, including the part where our daughter's name was on a criminal investigations witness list, became very cooperative very quickly. His share of the remaining amount was agreed upon within 10 days. Celeste's personal contribution, structured over 4 years through a formal repayment arrangement that Gideon drafted and that Derek co-signed as guarantor, accounts for the balance. I did not drain the college fund. I want to be clear about that. The 529 account is separate, protected, and will complete Celeste's degree. She finishes her junior year in May. She is, by every indication I have, still bright and still funny, and is in the process of understanding that the world has edges she did not previously respect. That is, I think, a necessary education. Brittany Solis was convicted of grand larceny in a proceeding that concluded 4 months after the incident. Her plea arrangement included restitution and a suspended sentence with conditions. Tatum Reeves accepted a similar arrangement. Neither of them is currently enrolled at the university. The beach house repairs were completed in March. Milo Torres and his crew did excellent work. The custom windows in the back bedroom are in. The furniture has been replaced with pieces I like even better than the originals. The master bathroom has a new floor, and the clawfoot tub is exactly where it was before. And on the first weekend I spent there after the repairs were done, I sat on the wraparound porch in the morning with coffee and listened to the ocean and felt, again, the specific satisfaction of a plan fully executed. My mother called me the week the repairs were finished. She said, "I want to come see it sometime if that's all right." I told her it was all right. Denise has not called. I did not expect her to, and I find I do not mind. Felix sent a brief email approximately 2 months after the dinner. It said, "For what it's worth, I thought you handled it with more grace than most people would have." I kept it because I keep things. Celeste and I have a standing phone call on Sunday evenings. It is not yet easy, but it is honest. Last month she told me she had looked up Dolores Vance's work online and wanted to know how I had found her. I told her about the afternoon in the Charleston Gallery 3 years ago when I had walked in without expecting anything and walked out knowing I was going to own that piece eventually. Celeste said, "That's very you." She did not say it unkindly. The conditions in the trust documentation remain in place. The beach house is still mine. What happens to it eventually is still a decision I will make on my own timeline, based on criteria that are already documented. Those criteria have not changed. But they have also not been triggered again. Some people in my family think I went further than I needed to. Others, I suspect, think I did not go far enough. I genuinely want to know which side you are on. Tell me in the comments.